Men are supposed to be tough. Men who cry are not real men. They are good leaders. Women are supposed to be reserved, clean, and organized. Gay men are all feminine. Lesbians hate men. These are some stereotypes every gender have to deal with. Stereotypes may either be positive or negative, but often it is the latter and usually are exaggerated. Positive stereotypes may also have negative effects on an individual. Being positively stereotyped makes a person feel less recognized. It all started with myself. When I was younger, I found it strange that I was subjected to different standards at other girls my age. When I got older, and even more so I became a college student, I began to question these standards and challenge them. At 15, I graduated as valedictorian and started help programs in my community for the environment. At 19, I entered college and joined an organization in my community that helps, share, and transform people's lives. Why should we live in fear of harassment, violence, and discrimination when basic human decency calls for respect, tolerance, and compassion? It all happened to me about 3 years ago. When I was in my first year in college, we have a debate that time, and a bunch of us college students got together one day. And we said, there's an explosion of writing and thinking in a feminist theory. So we did what college students typically do in a situation like that. We said, okay, let's have a study group. We'll read the text, we'll talk about it, we'll have a potluck dinner. So every day after class, 8 women, a man, and I got together. We would read some text in feminist theory and have a conversation about it. And during one of our conversations, I read a story that changed my life forever. It was the story of 2 women having a conversation. One of the women was white and one was black. And the white woman said, this is going to sound very anachronistic now. The white woman said, all women face the same oppression as women. All women are similarly situated in patriarchy, and therefore, all women have a kind of intuitive solidarity or sisterhood. And the black woman said, I'm not so sure. Let me ask you a question. So the black woman says to the white woman, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, what do you see? And the white woman said, I see a woman. And the black woman said, you see, that's the problem for me. Because when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, she said, I see a black woman. To me, race is visible. But to you, race is invisible. You don't see it. And then she said something really startling. She said, that's how privilege works. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. I stopped and then think. It's true. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. The Philippines is the only country in the world where women are parity to men in senior management roles. The gender situation in the Philippines is characterized by sharp contradictions. Thousands of Filipino women suffer from sex and other gender-related abuses, while Filipino women suffer the same domestic violence and economic disadvantages all over the country. Women in some parts of Mindanao and other conflict-affected areas in the Philippines suffer more. As in most countries affected by displacement brought about by armed conflict, women and children make up a great majority of the displaced population in the Philippines and experience additional vulnerabilities. The intermittent wars affect women's livelihood, health, education, and family life, among other things such as sexism, gender discrimination, violence, sexual harassment, and gender bias. In the Philippines, we have a lot of flight attendants. Flight attendants in the country are suffering from sexism and gender discrimination. As we enter the new millennium, this got worse when the compulsory age of recognition was lowered to 40. When women get pregnant and file a maternity leave, some companies deduct a percentage that depends from their year of service, thus reducing their retirement pay. On the other hand, men who file paternal leaves do not get the same deduction. Republic Act No. 6725, an act strengthening the prohibition on discrimination against women with respect to terms and conditions of employment, amending for this purpose Article 135 of the Labor Code as amended, prohibits discrimination with respect to terms and conditions of employment solely on the basis of sex. Under this law, any employer favoring a male employee over a female in terms of promotion, training opportunities, and other benefits solely on account of sex is considered discrimination. In the Philippines, 58% of incidents of sexual harassment happen on the streets, major roads, and esquinitas or alleys. Physical forms of sexual harassment occur mostly in public transport. In 2020, more than half of young women and girls in the Philippines have personally experienced some form of online harassment on social media platforms. The findings of the report show that 68% of girls and young women in the Philippines have experienced online harassment on social media. Majority of these girls also shared that the harassment happens frequently, which is 50%, or very frequently, which is 33%. It has gotten to the point that there are more Filipinos, girls, and young women facing online harassment than street harassment, with 43% of those surveyed agreeing that they or other girls they know have experienced this. Republic Act 7877, Anti-Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, an act declaring sexual harassment unlawful in the employment, education, or training environment and for other purposes. The state shall value the dignity of every individual, enhance the development of its human resources, guarantee full respect for human rights, and uphold the dignity of workers, employees, applicants for employment, students, or those undergoing training, instruction, or education. Towards this end, all forms of sexual harassment in the employment, education, or training environment are hereby declared unlawful. Following from constitutional provisions and the subsequent efforts to broaden its principles, numerous legislation were enacted that relates to the various aspects of women and gender issues and concerns. The list include Gender and Development Law. 5% of government agencies' budget is for gender concerns. Anti-sexual harassment law, defining sexual harassment and providing mechanisms. Anti-rape law, elevation of rape as crime against person. Women and Nation Building Law, allocation of budget for women from development funds from foreign governments and multilateral institutions. Anti-mail order bride law, which is making the practice unlawful. Non-discrimination law in labor code, women protection in hiring and pay. That being said, the Philippines remains the top country in Asia in terms of closing the gender gap according to the Global Gender Gap Report 2020 of the World Economic Forum. The report shows that the Philippines has closed 78% of its overall gender gap, garnering a score of 0.781, down by 1.8 percentage points from 0.799 in 2019. With this, it ranked 16th out of 153 countries with the narrowest gap between men and women, dropping by 8 notches from its place last year. The Global Gender Gap Report 2020 measured countries on their progress towards gender parity in 4 dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment.